That's how I start every presentation, every seminar, every group I talk to. And I bring that up because I bring it up to remind myself just how much the world changes in a moment that we stand in place. If you look at the industry, if you look at the job you were in, or if you retired that you were in, and think back 10, 15, 20 years if you've been around that long, the world's changed. Mark and I were talking at lunch, and he was talking about wanting to make changes, and some of the students he taught weren't necessarily on board with those changes. And I looked at him and said, boy, stuff really has changed. They have rights. Used to be they gave you a syllabus. Because the world's changed, we've kind of got to learn to adapt to that change. And one of the things that I've recently begun doing within the scope of the work I do is life coaching. Now, first of all, I'm going to tell you what life coaching isn't. You don't have to take your clothes off, run out in the desert, and sit under a pyramid and chant. Popular misconception. Second thing is, and I quote, it's not that body, mind, and spirit crap, is it? No, life coaching is an emerging field today that takes people who have expertise in certain areas and helps them apply it to a changing world. And what I'd like to share with you to start off with, what is life coaching? Well, first of all, we help our clients identify their goals and their desires. We develop strategies with them to overcome roadblocks. We identify and eliminate limiting beliefs. We help them be accountable to their dreams. We step outside their comfort zones to help them achieve their goals, and we act as a conduit. Now, I'm going to give you a real specific example of a type of life coaching I do, and I kind of want to start in looking at the area of acting as a conduit. I spent the first 22 years of my career in manufacturing management. And then I went into human resources, and I went into it in a variety of different areas. Went into training and development, I went into labor relations, I went into hiring and firing, you name it, I did it. When I started my own consulting business about 11 years ago, one of the things that I kind of developed a niche for was helping people hire. So I actually have clients that call me to interview people and then help them make a hiring decision. And usually it's when they get down to the last 4 or 5 people for a position, they'll ask me to spend a half hour, 45 minutes with each one of them and give them my feel on, are they going to be a fit for their culture, for their company, for their job. And here's one of the things I noticed, and I'm going to say this very neutrally. We send a lot of people into the workforce today ill-prepared to get jobs. You do not always hire the best person. You hire the person that's the best prepared to interview for the job. Well, I'll ask you a quick question. How long do you think someone initially looks at your resume when you mail it in? You want a job at XYZ company, and you mail them a resume. How long do you think the initial glance at your resume is?
Less than 10 seconds.
25, actually, Scott. 25 seconds, okay? Do you know how many, if you had 100 resumes come across your desk for a position, do you know approximately how many people you're going to call in for an interview out of those 100 people?
5.
5, exactly. The average is about 5 people. So you got 25 to 30 seconds to make an impact. You want to be one of the 5 people, and what I kind of, when I work with someone in career coaching, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today, one of the things I tell them is, don't throw the Boy Scout principle out there, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I will show up for work every day. You're supposed to, okay? I will be loyal. So is my dog. He stays at home. All right? Tell me, Larry Mayfield, why should you hire me? Okay? Here's part of the problem. I started by telling you the world's changing. We're still using hiring techniques that were there 25, 30 years ago. And the workforce we look at today, 25, 30 years later, is more intelligent, they're more educated, and they're more street smart. They also know that if they don't get your job done in 3 years, they're going to move on. Okay? Matter of fact, when they come to work for you, they're already planning 3, 5, 7, 9 years, and it's not like the good old days. When some of us went into the workforce, we expected to stay there for 25 to 30 years, get the gold watch, and retire. I have a son in Louisville who has a very, very good accounting job with a private firm. He's been there 3 years, he's gotten 3 promotions, and he was telling me the other day, would you look at my resume? Because I'm thinking of floating it out there. And a lot of times, that just doesn't compute in my 57-year-old mind. But the other thing that's changing, used to be you'd send your resume into the Human Resource Department. The Human Resource Department would put them in pile A, B, and C. Now, A are people who are qualified for the job. B are people who are in the same church but a different pew. You may be looking for an accountant, and I have a master's degree in finance. Well, if your A pile is real small, you might give your B pile a second look. The largest pile is the C pile, and that's the one that gets those, we'll keep your resume on file for a year. Thank you very much. Here's the problem. We don't teach people how to find jobs. Now, it's not Mark Mulpey's fault, okay? It's Pam's fault. She's not here. Yeah. It's not the educational system's issue. Because stop and think about it, when you go for either a bachelor's degree or advanced degree, you are paying somebody money to meet the requirements, to be furnished with a slip of paper that says you've met those requirements and the check must clear the bank, no matter whose check it is. Nowhere in that agreement does it say, Barbara, I'm going to help you find a job. And in most cases, we've got these young, bright people coming out of college today, ill-equipped. You don't always hire the best person, you hire the best prepared person. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, and I'm just going to skip through that. I want to give you some facts and figures. This is from Pew Charitable Fund Research. Historically, 70.1% of all high school graduates between the ages of 16 and 24 in 2009 were enrolled in college. That's whether it's a 2-year program, a 4-year program, or postgraduate. That equates to about 11.6 million people who are in higher education. They're either pursuing a certificate, a 2-year degree, or a 4-year degree. Now that does not take into account anybody that is a non-traditional student over the age of 24. My oldest son, John, worked for the Hahn Company. They went belly up. He is now finishing his degree up. Okay? He's 35 years old. Doesn't take that into account at all. Those are people between the ages of 18 and 24. Now at some point in time, those people are going to be jettisoned into the job market, and they're not going to be prepared. Now, back in the old days, Professor Maltby would sit around the fire with his Cocker Spaniel and his pipe, and a student would come to him for advice, and he would sagely nod, and they'd go out and do it. Well, back in those days, average size of employment in most companies in the United States was 300 plus. Today, the average sized company's employment is 100 less, between 75 and 100. You're dealing with a lot of small businesses. So if I come to work for you today right out of school, You're going to want me to do more than be the accountant, be the marketing person. You're going to want me to take on 2, 3, 4 different roles. And there's a real big reason why. Anybody know what the average student loan is today?
$30,000.
Yeah, you're a little low. 39. $39,000 is the average student loan. Now some of you think that when you got out of college, what it would have been like to be stabbed with a $39,000 debt on your back before you even began to work. So what ends up happening is these folks go into the job market and they want $70,000 a year. And somewhere somebody's clutching their chest doing the old Fred Sanford, I'm coming home, Elizabeth, okay? $70,000, my gosh, but when you start looking at what the cost of living is, and you know, the minute the ink's dry on that sheepskin, the clock starts ticking and you got to start paying that loan back. Now, on top of being really good looking, I read minds. Yeah, but John, that's a real low interest rate. Well, the average is $39,000. If you look at it demographically, you look at the East Coast and the West Coast, and it is in excess of $100,000, the money that has to be paid back. There is legislative movement going on now nationally to cut the low interest loans. Let them pay what you and I pay when we buy a car or a house. Let them go through a private lending institution. So I come into the workplace and I have this tremendous burden, and no one's helped prepare me for the next level. If I'm lucky that mom, dad, grandpa, the next door neighbor knows somebody that can get me an interview, yeah. But for the most part, I'm very ill prepared. Back in 2002, I had to do some digging this morning to make sure I had the date right. When former Commissioner Brake was at the Chamber of Commerce, we did a one-day series at Kentucky Wesleyan College for the people at the community college, for Brescia, and for Wesleyan, where I talked to a group of juniors and seniors about just preparing a resume for 3 hours. I thought we'd have 25, 30 people. We had 308 people sitting in that little room saying, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? Know where most people get their resumes from? Pardon me? Yeah, Microsoft. Okay. Microsoft gives you ready, because I'll tell you, when you're sitting there and you are looking at resume after resume after resume, when the objective statements are all the same, you start saying, they didn't write these. And please, if you have anyone near and dear to you looking for work, make sure they understand what their objective statement means. I interviewed a young lady about 3 or 4 months ago, and she had this objective statement that looked like part of the Constitution. And so I asked her what a line in there meant, and she goes, why would you ask me a question like that? I said, because it's in your objective statement. Oh. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Let me give you some more facts and figures. National unemployment rate. This is from USA Today, December 6, 2010. National unemployment rate is 9.8% overall. The minimum of a bachelor's degree, as of December 6, the national unemployment rate is 5.1%. I'm done with school. I have my degree. I owe you $39,000. Who's going to hire me? High school diploma, people with a high school diploma only 10%. High school dropouts 15.1%. There's really only, and I'm not a statistician, mathematician, or accountant, so don't hold me to my playing with figures. But when you start to look at what's going on, all right, there's not a lot of difference between the high school diploma and the bachelor's degree in employability, and the reason is they're not preparing. So somebody has to fill that niche, and you're looking at it, okay? Or you're looking at one of them, all right? And honestly, most of the time I barter services with college-age students. I had somebody do some typing for me about 5 years ago. I had a handbook that I needed to do. It was 170 pages long, and John types with 6 fingers, these 6, okay? Somebody needed a resume done and wanted a little bit of coaching on how to prepare for an interview. Said, you type this for me, we'll call it even. Okay. Before I went on my weight loss journey, it used to be lunch, okay? There's a void there. And I guess the reason I wanted to tie that into this today is that's really what coaching is about. Now, remember I told you I read minds, and you're sitting there and you're going, well, what does something like this cost? I mean, you know, Joan will be pulling the Lexus around in a little while. Usually, I will work with somebody, their initial session, interview session is 2 hours, and I'll charge them $75 for that. If I'll go at least 2 more sessions with them, and I'll charge them $40 a session. Now, that's for this niche. We don't have time, but I also do coaching for employers and businesses. Just to give you a good example, Mark, boss, comes to me and says, I don't think Mark's living up to 100% of his potential. He's really a good employee. Can you help get Mark to the next level? And I do work with people like that, and I'll be quite honest with you, that's where I make my money. We ain't putting this video on YouTube. I will. That's where I make my money. But in dealing with these folks, some people don't know how to put a simple resume together. And one of the things I will do is sit down and coach them what should go on there. Look, everybody's proud of what they've done. But if I got 30 seconds to look at your resume, I don't want to know you were in the band 10 years ago. I know it's near and dear to you, and I know it's really, really important. And look, my kids, all 6 of them, I've taken their resumes and gone, no. But Dad, okay, they told me this was really important. It was really important when you were in high school. It really was. Because I want to tell you, on the front end of this, we now have, in 60 Minutes, had it on about a year ago. We now have people coaching young people to get into college. You got parents paying boo-hoo amounts of money to somebody, and they're saying when they're sophomores in high school, here's Sally or Johnny's list of colleges they want to go to, and this coach will work with them because of their contacts at those colleges to get them into what we consider the top 10 colleges. Nobody's doing that on the back end when they're coming out. And you know, I started to recognize this as early as 1992, and one of the terms, and my kids have heard this speech over and over, I call it the big lie. Because you work hard, you pay your money, you go to school, you walk out on the other end, you fold up your cap and gown, and you walk out into the world because everybody's told you, you go to school, you get your degree, the world will be waiting for you, and it's not. And all of a sudden, you have a whole disenfranchised generation or so of people. 5.1% is the end of this year. Now, I want to be real quick to say, I'm not casting blame on anyone, okay? I'm not blaming the educational system. They're doing their job. Their job's to educate. I'm really not blaming industry, although I do, be quite honest with you, put more blame on business and industry than I do anywhere else, because I think it's our responsibility to tell you what we want. And then it's up to you to kind of say, hey John, if you really want to get into this field, here's what you need to do. All right. What do we do when we coach somebody in their career? And this just isn't college-age students. This can be anybody at any point in their career. I'm working with a gentleman in Michigan right now. I'm kind of doing a favor for a client of mine because this gentleman is his wife's mother-in-law's cousin, okay? And he's looking at changing careers. So he said, hey, would you mind looking at his resume? I help people with resume preparations, okay? And there's a lot that goes into resume preparations that people really aren't aware of. One of the things I coach people on is use action words. when you fill out a resume? I accomplished, I created, I administered, which means you just didn't show up. I was responsible for. Okay. Scott said, you know, you got that 30 seconds. He's going to look at a resume. Hey, I want to talk to this person. I want them in here. I'll be quite honest with you. I interview people sometimes, no intention of hiring them, but the resumes are so damned interesting, I want to talk to them. Okay. But that's what the purpose of a resume is. The purpose of a resume is, how are you? What happens in interview preparation? Your mother was right. Not about the clean underwear part, but I would encourage you to wear them. But your mother was right when she said you only get one chance to make a first impression. And when you walk through the door of that interview room, if you kind of, hey, Tanya, how are you? All right, that's going to stick. Now, I also coach people not to knock Larry off his chair and into the next comedy. Larry, it's a pleasure to meet you. Okay. I've dealt with people like that too. How do you prepare for an interview? What do you need to know? And the number one thing, do you know what the hardest thing is to teach somebody? Anyone?
Do a little research on the company or the agency.
No, they pretty much know that. You in education are doing a good job with that because everybody does that. Anyone? Bueller? Be yourself. People say, well, I've got to be prepared and I've got to have this and the whole list of these questions and everything else. Tell people, be yourself. Because if I hire you, Barbara, I'm hoping you're going to be with me a good long time. I want to know who you are. And if our values don't match, if what we believe in doesn't match, there's no sense in you coming to work for me. How many have heard about a guy that they worked with, stayed there 6 months, where he said, boy, what the heck did we hire him or her for? And they went right across the street. And about 2 months later, you run into the guy that owns the company across the street and says, I don't know why you let him get away. That's the best darn thing I've ever hired. Sure, for your company. It's kind of hard to get that message through when you got close to $40,000 in debt hanging over your head. Next thing is targeting niche markets. Now, wonderful. Ooh, that's a lifetime. Wonderful story to tell you. I worked with a young lady, graduated from the University of Kentucky, and had a degree in fashion merchandising. All right. Pardon me? That's a pretty narrow niche, and didn't want to work in fashion merchandising. Give her all the credit in the world. She could have gone to UK on an athletic scholarship. But she said, I had enough of that in high school. I wanted to do what college students do. Got out of school, took the first job that was offered to her with a soft drink manufacturer, stayed there 6 months and was terribly unhappy. It was kind of when I came into contact with her through her father. So we had lunch one day, and I said, what do you want to do? And she said, well, ultimately, I want to be a pharmaceutical rep. Okay, what's your degree in? Fashion merchandising. All righty then. She said, but I'm getting ready to interview for this job right now. It's kind of a step down from a pharmaceutical rep. She said they go to doctor's office and they sell orthopedic, like walkers and different type of therapeutic devices that people use. And her territory was probably about 70 miles from her house, so she had to leave her home every day and travel to that area, Bowling Green, E-Town area, to do that. And then she sat there and I said, well, how much money are you looking for in doing this? And she wrote a figure down on a sheet of paper, and I almost swallowed my Adam's apple because it was about $8,500 a year higher than what that job is rated in Western Kentucky. By the way, just a little aside, the way jobs are rated. Do you know how jobs are rated by pay scale? Who responds to the survey of the company that puts out the pay scale ratings? So if, for example, an associate professor in the community college system, if the president of the college responded and they make $200,000 a year and they were the only person that responded, that's what they'd show. Wage scales are very deceptive, but a lot of people hire by them. At any rate, I said to her, good luck, And she said, well, help me prepare for this interview. And I said, the only thing I can tell you is you need to go in there and tell them you're worth this figure. And you need to show them that. And she told me, John, I'm not going to have a problem doing it. This was on a Thursday. She called me Friday and said I had the interview. I think it went real, real well. She called me Monday and she said I got the job and they gave me $500 a year more than I asked for. That's finding a niche market. Stop and think a minute about the type of work you do. And someone who genuinely comes in to interview with you, and I hate to use the word passion because it's so misused, but really has a strong interest in your company and its field and really, really wants to do a bang-up job, you're more attracted to them than you are somebody comes in, well, I need a job. I got $40,000 a year to repay. You find a niche market. Now, today, and literally today, that young lady is interviewing with Eli Lilly this afternoon. But one of the things I was able to do, and if you remember to go back to the first slide I showed you and said one of the things coaches do is act as conduits. I know somebody who used to recruit pharmaceutical representatives in the state of Kentucky, found that out quite by accident and said, would you mind if she gave you a call? No, not at all. I realize that's one of those success stories, you know, that you put in books and whatnot. But it's a real good example. Talk to people about the philosophy of hiring. Real quick, human resources is not the first person you talk to anymore. That is changing, changing, changing. If Rudy gets ready to hire someone, and Rudy is the vice president of manufacturing, he's going to make the initial contact, and then he's going to see if he has the warm fuzzy. And if he has the warm fuzzy, then we'll jump him through the hoops. Human resources is moving back into the role that it held a number of years ago, where we make sure you're not lying to us, or as I say, you're not running from the law. You do have a doctorate from Yale. By the way, 37% of all resumes have some falsification. Didn't say a lot, said falsification, because I've talked to people who have told me they believe everything about themselves they wrote there. And do what? Creating clear expectations. What can you expect when you get into the job market? I tell college-age people that I deal with, you need to start preparing a month before the end of your sophomore year in college. Part of your full-time job as a junior and senior in college should be preparing for the workforce in a number, and first of all, deciding what you want to do. It may not be what you're going to do the rest of your life, but what do you want to do? Because there's so many times I walk into an interview room with people and say, well, Vaughn, tell me, why do you want to work here? Because I need a job. Well, you know, if it's my purse you're going into for your wage, I ain't going to sleep real well at night knowing that the only motivation you have to work here is that you need a job. And if you go back and look at that slide I talked about previously, okay, what's really pushing against degree people today are people without degrees, because I'm also telling you that there are some companies that are saying, I can get the same bang for less money if I hire a high school graduate. That's kind of a specific overview on what coaching is. It fills a niche, it fills a gap, and it helps people kind of create some balance in their lives. Questions, comments, sarcastic remarks?
John, you ever heard of a thing called a DACM?
A DACM, no.
And some people use it. There's colleges that started using it. It's called developing a curriculum for specific jobs. They take
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that.
Job test analysis and develop the studies and curriculum in college to prepare you to do something.
Exactly.
Instead of just throwing you out a bunch of stuff.
In the right hands, it's a wonderful tool. I'll tell you a story. So I go to a lot of job fairs. So at a job fair down in Murray about 2 years ago, a young lady come up looking for a job with one of my clients. I said, what's your degree in? German? Why do you have a degree in German? Well, they put me through all this testing my first year of college, and they said foreign languages was my niche. I said, well, it looks like maybe you want to teach. I hate kids, okay? Try the German consulate. In the right hands, it's an exceptional tool. But like everything else, and this is something, this is one of my, now you got me going. This is one of my pet peeves, okay? We take something, and we have a handful of people who know how to use that tool correctly, and all of a sudden everybody and their brother is using this tool, and it's kind of like giving a 5-year-old control of the suitcase that, you know, is by the president all the time. It's a good tool when it's used right. The other thing I'm going to tell you is everything that happens at Harvard, Yale, and Stanford isn't always necessarily correct and the best thing. We kind of have a tendency to take some of these, like the Harvard Business Review. I have a client that it's right next to his Bible by his bed. Anything that comes out of the Harvard Business Review, that's how we work. Well, theoretically, yes. Any other questions? Do I have time for one?
I'll let you get one more.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Dave Ramsey once said it doesn't make any sense to want to go to Duke or Harvard or Vanderbilt when you're not on a full scholarship, because the money that you have to borrow is much more than the $39,000 you were saying. And once you get into the job field, you know, you're not going to get that much better job, so why not just go to a state school and be done with it, get your degree, and instead of going even to Brescia or Kentucky Wesleyan or something like that, unless you have tons of scholarship money.
Or, and I agree with that, or you're going to become a neurosurgeon and you want to work at Johns Hopkins or something very, very specific. International studies. Stanford is Condoleezza Rice, graduated from Stanford, was the president of Stanford. Okay, I'll shut up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn the camera off.